Welcome to the church family that is lifting lives through living love, inspiring hope, filling with faith, and transforming our world. These recorded messages are made available so that you might have additional opportunities to stay connected with us and that you might learn and grow in your faith. God bless you as you hear the word today. And now, the message.
Good morning. Today's reading comes from the book of Luke, chapter 15. Jesus continued, "There was a man who had 2 sons. The younger one said to his father, 'Father, give me my share of the estate.' So he divided his property between them. Not long after that, the younger son got together all he had, set off for a distant country, and there squandered his wealth in wild living. After he had spent everything, there was a severe famine in that whole country, and he began to be in need. So he went and hired himself out to a citizen of that country, who sent him to the fields to feed the pigs. He longed to fill his stomach with the pods that the pigs were eating, but no one gave him anything. When he came to his senses, he said, 'How many of my father's hired servants have food to spare, and here I am starving to death? I will set out and go back to my father and say to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Make me like one of your hired servants.' So he got up and went to his father. But while he was still a long way off, his father saw him and was filled with compassion for him. He ran to his son, threw his arms around him, and kissed him. The son said to him, 'Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son.' But the father said to his servants, 'Quick, bring the best robe and put it on him. Put a ring on his finger and sandals on his feet. Bring the fattened calf and kill it. Let's have a feast and celebrate. For this son of mine was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found.' So they began to celebrate. May the Lord bless the reading and the hearing of his word."
Quickly, the father says, "Bring out the best robe and put it on him. Put a ring on his finger and sandals on his feet. Bring out the fatted calf and let's celebrate." I've read this story, I don't know how many times. It's probably my favorite story that Jesus tells, the story of the prodigal son. And I've preached it, I don't know how many times. But as I read it today, I found myself kind of drawn to those few words where the father presents the son with a series of gifts. And that's all I want to talk about this morning, that narrow slice of the story. And just to kind of get you in the mindset for this, I want to ask you a question. Do you have any item, something that was gifted to you by your parents or by your grandparents even, something that has enormous value in your life? And I'm sure if you can kind of think of what that thing is, the value of that item, whatever it may be, is not just its material worth, it's symbolic significance. It's what it represents in your life. Well, in the same way, these gifts that the father quickly gives to his son, each one of them carries amazing, enormous symbolic significance. The robe, the ring, the sandals, and the calf. And I want to just take a moment and kind of unpack the symbolism of them all. So let's start with the robe, right? Quickly get a robe and put it on him. For us to understand the significance, the value, the meaning of the robe, we have to first understand the condition of the son. Because the son was in a world of shame at that point. From the moment he went to his father and demanded his portion of the inheritance, it was a shameful act that would bring shame not just on himself, but on the entire family. Because in order to meet the son's request, most of your wealth was tied up in land. And so the father would have had to sell a portion of his land in order to give the son his share of the inheritance. So the whole community would have seen the brokenness and pain of the father. The shame was upon all of them. The younger son doesn't feel this shame, at least at first, because he has the money and he goes off and he parties. He does everything he wants to do. He only begins to feel the shame when the money runs out. And he finds himself without any friends. And he finds himself in the most shameful job that a kosher Jew could imagine. He's feeding pigs, the most unclean animal there is. And while he's hungry, wishing for the food that he's giving to the pigs, in that moment he wakes up to his shame and he comes to the idea, I have no other options except to go back home. Believe me, if he had any other options in life, he would have done that. Because going back home meant that he had to face the shame of his father, the shame of his own actions. And facing our own shame is incredibly hard and difficult. And so the son kind of practices his speech, right? He says, Father, I've sinned against heaven and against you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. He's going to go before the Father, wrapped in his shame. And you can imagine his clothes, the clothes that he'd worn in the pig pit, the clothes that he'd worn as he crossed the desert, how sweaty and dirty and foul they must be. He is clothed in shame. And once we understand that, then we can understand the value of the robe. So let's take a quick tour through the Old Testament and see how this symbolism of the robe is used. Let's start with the most famous robe of all time, the multicolored, many-colored dream coat, or the Technicolor dream coat, as the play or the musical puts it. When it begins with Jacob, who has 12 sons, and Joseph is his favorite. And how does he show his love and his favor? By gifting him with a special robe. Fast forward to David. David kills Goliath. He's brought into Saul's household, becomes fast friends with Saul's son, Jonathan. And even though they should be rivals, they make peace. They make a covenant together. And how is this covenant bound? It says Jonathan made a covenant because he loved him as himself. And what did he do? He gave him his princely robe and said, you can wear my robe. This is my favorite. Go to the story of Esther. And if you're familiar with the story of Esther, she has a cousin named Mordecai, an older cousin named Mordecai, who at one point helped save the king from a plot of assassins. And Xerxes, who's the king, at one point wants to repay Mordecai for the favor he has done for him. So he goes to Haman, who is his top advisor. And he says, Haman, what should the king do for the one he wants to honor? Now Haman, because he's the top advisor, thinks, oh, this is me. The king wants to honor me. So he tells him, here's what you should do. For the man the king wishes to honor, let royal robes be brought that the king has worn, and let them robe the man that the king delights to honor, and lead him on horse throughout the city streets, proclaiming before him, this is what the king does for the man he delights to honor. So whether it's a father, or whether it's a friend, or whether it's a king, when someone gives robes, it communicates honor and love and delight. The son comes before the father in shame. He has done nothing to merit honor, love, delight. If anything, he deserves rejection. He's afraid of it. He thinks that's what's going to happen. And before he can even get his whole speech out of his mouth, before he's done anything of value or worth for the father preemptively covers up his shame with honor. How powerful, how beautiful is that? It's an echo of the very beginning of the Bible story in the Garden of Eden. Adam and Eve sin against God, right? They use and abuse their freedom to do the exact thing God told them. Their eyes are open. And what do they feel in that moment? They feel shame. They're aware of their nakedness. And what's their first instinct? To cover it up. They cover it up with fig leaves, poorly, but they can't hide from God. And when God finds them, yes, he must punish them. But what does God do to show his continued love and care for them? He fashions them clothes. So this is just a foretaste I think, a sign and a symbol of what God will do for us. Though our righteousness is like dirty rags, as the prophet Isaiah says, we will be robed someday in a robe of his righteousness. Not that we've earned it, it's his righteousness, not ours, but God will take our shame and clothe us in his love and righteousness. We are destined for robes of righteousness. Now we get to the ring. Now, just as with the robe, the ring carries special significance. Kind of like my wedding band isn't just something pretty on my finger. It has a symbolic meaning behind it, right? So what does the ring represent? Well, let's go back to those same Old Testament stories, shall we? Let's start with Joseph. Joseph had the beautiful robe, but he flaunted it over his brothers, made them jealous. So they threw him into a pit, sold him into slavery, took that beautiful robe that his father Jacob had given him and tore it up and covered it in blood and said he'd been killed by a wild boar. Joseph was sold into slavery. He endured slavery. He endured prison. And yet God took those circumstances to shape his heart and to prepare him to one day bring him before Pharaoh at just the right time when he could interpret Pharaoh's dreams and prevent the starvation of thousands or more in Egypt. And when the Pharaoh saw that Joseph could correctly interpret his dreams and that he had a plan for how to care for the harvest in order to prevent, or survive the famine they were going to go through, Pharaoh made Joseph his second in command. Now, when he made him his second in command, what does it say? It says, then Pharaoh took his signet ring from his own finger and put it on Joseph's finger. He dressed him in robes. He got robes again, of fine linen, and made him ride in chariot as second in command. Thus, he put him in charge of the whole land of Egypt. Let's go to Esther, pick back up that thread. Last we left, Mordecai was being paraded throughout the city as a hero. Now, before that moment came, Haman had tricked the king into signing an edict authorizing the persecution of all the Jewish people. And so when the plot came to light, Haman was killed, the plot was discovered, but the problem is the king had already signed the royal decree authorizing this persecution. He couldn't undo it. So what did he do? Well, he took his ring and he took it off his finger and gave it to Mordecai. And he said, I authorize you to write letters on behalf of the Jewish people, to send them throughout the kingdom. And no document written in my name and sealed with my ring could ever be revoked. You see what I'm saying? The ring makes you an extension of the person who gives you the ring. It gives you authority and responsibility. So when the Father gives his ring to his Son, he is now saying, this Son is an extension of me. He is restoring to him authority and responsibility. One commentator I read put it this way. He says, the Father doesn't just welcome him back home. He welcomes him to responsibility. The Son isn't going to sit on the bench. He's now going to be part of the team. He has the authority to give commands to the servants, and the servants have to obey because the Son is an extension of the Father. Think about Jesus, how often he said his own authority came not from him, but through the Father. Now, this Son had once had rings. Perhaps his fingers glittered with them when he was younger, right? But what did he do with those rings? What did he do with his authority and his responsibility? He pawned them off. He pawned off his responsibility, and what happened? He lost his authority. He ended up a slave. And in the same way, I think all of us, we take the responsibility and the authority God gives us, and what do we do with it? We misuse it. We choose the wrong thing again and again and again. We choose it thinking we're getting our own freedom, but we end up slaves to sin, no less than the prodigal son. But this is the beauty of what God does for us. He doesn't just forgive us our sins. He doesn't just clothe us in his robes of righteousness. He breaks the power of sin in our lives. There's an old Wesley hymn, "Oh, for a thousand tongues to sing." He says, he breaks the power of canceled sin. He sets the prisoner free. And this is the irony of how we understand Christian freedom. that we are set free. Our will, our actions, our deeds, our thoughts are brought into alignment only when we submit to the authority of Jesus Christ. When we put him on the throne of our lives, somehow, amazingly, in that submission, then we can be trusted with true responsibility and true authority. That's when we receive the ring again. And then come the sandals. The sandals, whenever I think of the sandals, the father placing the sandals on the son's feet, I think about children in Haiti that I've had the opportunity, the gift of being able to distribute shoes on mission trips. The children in Haiti and older people in Haiti too, they put hard miles on their feet. A lot of times they don't have shoes at all. They just kind of run barefoot wherever they go. And a lot of times we would take down these duffel bags full of these cheap flip-flops, they're like $1 at Walmart kind of thing. And the kids were so happy to see them, but they would last all of a day before that little toe thing popped out, but they'd still wear them even with the toe thing popped out. And so it's something, I've experienced the beauty and the gift of being able to give someone shoes to replace, what's broken on their feet. It's not just a gift of honor, but it's also a gift. It can be life-saving in those conditions because so many worms, parasites enter through the feet. And so it can actually be life-saving. So when I picture the shoes or the feet of the prodigal son, I picture them maybe in some worn out sandals that are all busted and broken, or maybe he is completely barefoot. Maybe his feet are cracked and bleeding from a long journey across the desert home. And when the father gives him shoes, commentators are split. It could have one of two meanings. The first possible interpretation is that it's a restoration of sonship, because in those days, servants did not wear shoes in the house. Family members could wear shoes inside the house, but when a servant entered into the home, they removed the shoes from their feet. And remember, what was the son's words to the father? I've sinned against you, and I'm no longer worthy to be called your son. Make me a servant. At least that's how he practiced the speech in his head. But when he gets before the father, he can't finish the speech. He says, I'm no longer worthy to be called your son. But before he can say, make me a servant, the father says, bring out some shoes. Put those on his feet, because he is still my son. That identity has not changed. So it's a symbol, perhaps, of his sonship. But there's a second meaning that I find even more powerful. And this, you got to go back to the prophet Isaiah. At one point, the prophet Isaiah was told to put on sackcloth, on your body, and then to remove the sandals from his feet. And he was to parade and walk among the people of Israel for 3 years in this way, in order to symbolize a judgment that at one point, he's prophesying against the Egyptians and the Cushites, but that someday the king of Assyria will lead away stripped and barefoot the captives and the exiles. You see, when you were defeated, conquered by another country, and when they took you into exile, your shoes were taken away from you. Shoes, bare feet was a sign of an exiled people. And of course, we know Israel experienced their own exile, their own time when they were marched into slavery across the desert in Babylon. And so if the lack of sandals, if bare feet equals exile, then in some ways when the father was giving the son sandals again, he was saying, you're no longer an exile, son. You're home. You're back where you are meant to be. And to me, these two interpretations of sonship and home, they're not contradictory, they're complementary. God is saying, or the father is saying to the son, you're home, you're where you're meant to be, you are now and always my son. And that's just in one verse of scripture. In a matter of seconds, the father reverses the fortunes of the son. He clothes his shame with robes of honor. He places a ring of authority and responsibility upon his finger. He puts sandals on his feet so that he can know he is in his home where he is a son again. And just when you think it can't get any better than that, then the father says, bring out the fatted calf and kill it. Let's have a big old party. Now, a fatted calf would have been of such incredible worth in that day and age. We know it's costly Because that's what triggers the older brother. When he comes in from the fields and he sees that the fatted calf has been killed, he can't help it. He goes ballistic on the father. He says, all these years I've been slaving for you. I've done everything you ever asked me to do, and you never gave me even a young goat so I could have a party with my friends. And now this son of yours, notice he says son of yours, not brother of mine. This son of yours who has squandered your property with prostitutes comes home, and you kill the fatted calf for him. You see, the older brother says he is worthless, and you're taking something of exceeding worth and giving it to him. It's just a waste, Dad. But for the dad, it's not just, the fatted calf isn't just a symbol of worth. It's a symbol of celebration. He says, my son, you're always with me, and everything I have is already yours, but we had to celebrate and be glad because this brother of yours, see how the father changes that? Not this son of mine, but this brother of yours was lost, and now he's been found. He's dead, and now he is alive again. And so we had to celebrate. We had to throw this party. This is the theme throughout Luke 15. There's 3 stories in quick succession. The story of the lost sheep, the story of the lost coin, the story of the lost son. And in all 3, when the lost thing gets reclaimed, the shepherd, the woman looking for the coin, and the father, what do? They throw a party, and they invite all the neighbors to join in it. And that's the key here, is the joining of neighbors. This wasn't just like a small private family gathering, a little celebration. No, this is a celebration that is open to the whole community, because the father is celebrating, but he's also restoring his son within the community. This is why the father ran to him from the beginning. Because remember, when the son rejected the father, really whom he was rejecting was the whole community. Their traditions and their ways, he was leaving it all behind. And so they would have, joined in the judgment against him, the older brother's judgment against him. They would have shunned and exiled him. He was dead to them. And so when the father runs to the son, why is he running? Because he wants to get out ahead of them. He wants to get out ahead of the son's shame, but he also wants to get out ahead of the community's judgment. And in throwing this party, he's reintroducing his son to the community, robed in his righteousness, clothed with his sandals and his rings, saying, this is my son who is alive again. We should celebrate and receive him together. I know sometimes the church can feel like an older brother convention. Like, it can feel like in this place, we all have to have our acts together. We have to say, when someone says, how are things? We have to say, oh, it's all good. We have to be put together and so forth. But when we come into this place, we're walking into the party of the Father. It's his celebration. It's his joy. He loves it when people come home to him. And when we enter this place, we are entering into the party of the Father, and we stand robed in his righteousness. We stand in the sonship, the gift of fatherhood, or of sonship and daughtership that he gives to us. We are equipped with his ring, not to cast judgment on others. That's a misuse of the authority that God gives us. Instead, we're given his authority and responsibility so that we can reach out to others, to extend God's love and mercy to them, and to welcome them in to the party and celebration. Because our Father loves it when lost things get found. So wherever you may be this morning, whether you are a prodigal or whether you're an older son, or whether you're somewhere in between, this is my hope for you, that you might realize the fullness of the Father's gifts to you. The gift of honor and love, the gift of responsibility and authority, the gift of sonship and daughtership, that you are his child, the gift of a community surrounding you, a celebration and love, that you might recognize the greatness of the Father's celebration over you. Because over you, he says, once you were dead, but you are alive again. Over me, he says, once you were lost, and now you've been found. To the glory and praise and celebration of the Father. Amen. So this time I invite Jamelyn to come forward. We've been doing this all series long as we've been talking about parables. I preach the sermon and then we discuss about it. She just gave me a note that said SNL, I got a robe sketch.
Do you know that one?
I don't. That's why I'm like.
Yes, you do.
I do?
Oh, it's at Christmas time. It's so
it's where
funny.
the mom
It's a
is like-
commercial. And it's like, I got a boat. I got a car. And
Yes.
all the kids are saying everything they got on Sunday morning. And then
Kristen
the
was
mom's
like,
like,
I got a
robe. And then they keep going like, I got a Porsche and I got it. And she's like, and I got a robe. Like, the robe is the only thing the mom got.
But see, now we understand
Now,
that in
I was
different
like,
ways. Yeah.
so when he mentioned that, it sprung to my head. I was like, well, she should have been happy with a robe. I don't know what her problem is. I'll let Kristen Wiig know. I think she was the one who played that.
She missed the biblical significance.
She imagine that on SNL. They missed the biblical significance.
So I want to ask you the same question I started the sermon with. Is I asked everybody, do you have an item of special significance that is from your parents or your grandparents?
Funny you should ask me that, Dave. I happen to bring something.
Yeah.
You know, when you were talking, I have a signet ring.
You do?
Yeah, my parents gave me a signet ring my senior year in college. It doesn't fit me as well as it used to. But I have a signet ring. I didn't realize I should be dipping it in wax, signing it with everything. But what'd you call it?
Item of worth? I don't know.
Is this picture. So can you?
It's okay.
Can we zoom in on that? That'd be great. It's the golden rule, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. It's a Norman Rockwell piece, but this was always by our front door when I was growing up. And I always loved it because it's all different kinds of people and different kind of faiths represented. And my parents kept it right next to our front door. And so, you know, as I got older, I understood the symbolism that they were trying to share with people who were coming in and out. And so then my parents gave it to me. My mom and dad gave it to me for Christmas in 2013. And now it's in a prominent place in our house too. So,
yeah.
How about you?
Well, mine is a ring, actually. Not this ring. This came from you.
Sort of.
So, although this ring also...
Correct, yeah.
This ring was my dad's ring
it was his father's wedding ring, and then he wears it. But that's not the ring you're talking about that I insigniated inside. And told you how much I loved you with.
I should probably say, just stick with that answer. This is my dad's ring that was given to me by my wife. But no, actually, for me, it was a ring my dad had made for me when I was. He passed away when I was 6. My brother was 8, and he took a gold belt buckle and he melted it down and made 2 signet rings, one for me and one for my brother. And I wore it. Mom didn't give it to me at that time. I think I was too young, but maybe 2nd or 3rd grade, she gave it to me, and I wore it all the way until I put this ring on my finger. And so that it carried a lot of significance and worth for me. And then my brother lost his, just to complete the story. He lost his when he was in 8th grade or 9th grade. I can't remember.
I didn't know you then. So.
Yeah, you didn't know me then. So when I got this ring, I took the signet ring that I had that was given to me by my dad and had his initials put on it and gave it to him. So he could have the ring that Dad had given to each of us. So, yeah. Okay, so that's just no biblical significance, just kind of, biblical stuff. So anyways, to the story, I said there were 4 things: the robe, the ring, the sandals, and the calf. And I'm just curious, of those 4, which one speaks most powerfully to you?
The fatted calf has always spoke most powerfully to me. I love a good party. I love a good celebration. I love a good dinner party, especially. And I like having people over and, helping people feel special and like they belong. And so the fatted calf for me. And it has another significance because I have lived somewhere where people will have one cow, and that will be like their savings account.
Yeah, their life savings.
Their life savings. Yeah, sorry. And to see them kill it so they can have a huge celebration, like I realize what's at stake. Like they've given up security, they've given up their nest egg, they've given up a lot to be able to have this celebration. And so it really is for a special time to be able to do that. In Haiti, it was more with goats than it was. I mean, occasionally people would have a cow, but those were like really well-off people.
Right.
The goats, though, were probably the next level.
Right. But I would say, like when I think about the calf, I think, because it was something of huge value, but I think of the father, he's consistent from beginning to end, right? Like he's always, at the beginning, he sells the land, he's generous, and then at the end, he kills the fatted calf, he's generous. Like that generosity is consistent. But I think in the first part, I think about the sorrow it had to take when he sold that land to grant the son's request to let him go free versus the joy and celebration of the return. I think, I bet he even hardly felt like it was a sacrifice. It was just an expression of his joy and how complete that was.
He doesn't hesitate
either. He doesn't. I mean, instantly, this is what we're going to do.
Yeah.
Almost like he pre-planned it, like he'd already thought.
He was sitting
if I ever see my son again. So here's the interesting thing we were talking about. The son disappears from the story at that point, right? The father gives all these, the younger son disappears. Then the story shifts to the older brother. But I'm just curious, when you think about the younger son, what do you think it was like to receive all of those gifts in quick succession?
It is interesting because you don't hear, he doesn't like say, oh no, don't do all of that. He accepts it, which probably teaches us that accepting gifts sometimes can be hard, but how much joy it gave the father to be able to do that for his son. What was the question?
The younger son, how did his experience?
Well, he was having a huge party. I don't know,
Well, I don't know. I think about the younger son, and I think, that's what he was chasing after something, right? Like he was chasing after the high life, and he was like wasted all the money and the wealth on parties. But I feel like this party was different because all those parties were empty, and this party was full.
Well,
I don't know.
I see it more as he had obviously had a father that loved him, that would give him what he asked for, and they seemed to be well off. And so he had really no reason to leave, except that there was this unknown out there, which I can identify with the younger son in that way. Like I have a little, well, maybe that will be fun, like staying in your...
A FOMO?
Kind of FOMO, yeah.
Fear of missing out for those who don't do acronyms.
Thank you. But I mean, because I like to celebrate and I like to do those things, I'm always wondering, well, what's going on over there? What's going on over there? I work really hard as I'm getting older to just be content right here and understand the joy that stability can bring. And I think probably the younger son is realizing that was fun for a minute, but really the security, there's joy in knowing people love you. There's joy in being somewhere where you are cared for and you know what's going to happen versus seeking chaos and fun.
Yeah, I think sometimes that fear of missing out, we're chasing after things so much, but we miss out on what's right in front of us. And I imagine the younger son appreciates the father's love and care in a way that he never did before.
Well, it's kind of like one of those things where, let's say forever you thought, well, if I can just get there, it's going to be awesome. And then you get there and you're like, uh-oh.
Now I got to get here.
That's not as awesome as I thought. You know, I mean, that's part of the growing and learning. And for the younger son, he realized when he's hanging out with pigs, I think I've made an error in judgment here. And I think in some ways, I know I have, and probably you all have said, if I could just do this, or if I could just, it's like that thing you said a couple weeks ago where you seek ambition. And, Dillard Willard said it.
Dallas Willard.
Same guy, yeah. But, if you keep seeking something, you don't realize that's not really the goal.
Yeah. anything for older brothers, because I imagine there's some folks today. I know for a long time I identified with that older brother and felt the unfairness of this. Anything for older brothers that maybe wrestle with this story?
I think it's interesting for the older brother. He was very quick to disassociate himself from his brother. This son of yours,
right.
Which is fascinating because in a way he's kind of taking a step back away from his dad too by saying, I don't know who you crazy people are, but I'm not related to you. You know, and I think for the people who do stay, there can be resentment when other people are leaving and going places and you don't realize the stability and the love that you have surrounding you too.
I think that word you just said, resentment, is huge. Like when I think of the older brother, that's what I think of, is he's just filled with resentment.
He's missing out on the party.
He's not happy the brother came home. He's resentful that the brother came home. He's resentful of the father's love. He's resentful of, and in the same way that the discontent of the younger brother made him miss out on what was already there in front of him, I feel like the resentment of the older brother keeps him from he's missing out on the party, the celebration. And that's why I love the father says, this brother of yours, like he reminds him, this person is someone to you too, and we have to celebrate. Yeah.
The older brother was smart. He would have been cozying up to the younger brother who had the signet ring.
I think the older brother still had his ring. I don't think he lost it. So.
I mean, he had the signet ring, though, is all I'm saying. It's like, I'm just saying.
Yeah, you're just saying.
Good morning. My name is Peggy Reef, and I am the administrative assistant here at Zionsville UMC. Thank you for joining us today. We would love to get to know you more and spend some time with you. If you'd like to know more about our faith community, please visit our church website at zumc.org. There, you'll find the many ministry opportunities we have to offer. If you need to contact one of our staff members, all of our contact information is at the bottom of each webpage. You can also connect with us via social media throughout your week for daily inspiration and community. You'll find us on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube under username Zionsville UMC. Once again, thank you for joining us this morning, and we hope you have a wonderful week.